All right, so last week we covered Jacob meeting back up with his older brother, twin brother Esau. They reconcile despite Jacob's fear of Esau. He's going to murder him for wronging him decades ago. But they reconcile. And remember, Esau's like, hey, I'll escort you guys the rest of the way into the promised land, into my territory, Edom. And Jacob's like, sure, sounds great. You lead the way. We'll meet you there. And then Jacob goes the opposite direction, doesn't he? Keep that in mind because that's going to come up later in this study. So that's where we're going to pick it up. Esau goes south, Jacob goes north into Sukkot, and then over west to Shechem within the land of Canaan, the promised land. And this is what Genesis chapter 34 is picking up with. So now Dinah, the daughter of Leah, whom she had borne to Jacob, went out to see the women of the land. And when Shechem, the son of Hamor the Hivite, the prince of the land, saw her, he seized her and lay with her and humiliated her. And his soul was drawn to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob. He loved the young woman and spoke tenderly to her. So Shechem spoke to his father Hamor, saying, "Get me this girl for my wife." Already you want to slap him, all right? So instead of going to Bethel, as Jacob once vowed he would to God on his way out of the promised land back in Genesis 28, a vow that God himself recently reminded Jacob of in Genesis 31, and will again command this time Jacob to do, return to Bethel in Genesis 35. Jacob's family has now set up residence 20 miles north of Bethel, outside the city of Shechem in Canaan. Okay, that's where he's at, in Shechem, Canaan, north of Bethel. Now they must have been there for some time because Jacob's sons are now referred to as men, okay? And here in this verse specifically, Dinah, she is referred to as a young woman. Actually, that's in verse 12, but she goes and sees other women of the land. So in recent chapters, Jacob's been bearing these children through these women, his two wives, and then his two, I guess you call them concubines. And we're told that he eventually has Dinah, and they all would have been like little toddlers and young kids by this time, but apparently so much time has passed since those chapters. Now Dinah's a young woman, which means she's probably in her late teens, and that means her older brothers would be in their 20s, most likely. Maybe early 30s, but definitely with that go-get-'em attitude that young men typically kind of have, okay? As we will see later in this chapter. And as a young woman, she has gotten to know the local women in this town of Shechem. And so she heads into town to socialize with them. Now, you might not think there's a problem with that, but you got to keep the context of the situation in mind, right? Now, God doesn't straight out condemn this. There's nothing in God's word that says, and Dinah sinned and went out and hung out with other women of the town. But we must keep in mind God's calling for Abraham and his descendants, and what is their calling? It's to remain separate from the world, okay? The Israelites were called to come out of the world and remain separate, right? Because the world is ungodly, especially in this land of Canaan. So Jacob and his sons, who also should have been looking out for their sister, they should have been guarding Dinah from such a pagan culture. And we're about to see just how pagan and wicked this culture is. Where in this culture in Canaan, single young women were fair game. The men could do whatever they wanted to them. Okay? And we'll get into that more here in a second. But just recall what the Bible has already said about Esau's two local Canaanite wives, right? They were major headaches for Isaac and Rebekah, weren't they? Okay, so these women of the land that Dinah is now associating with, it's not good, okay? They should have been looking out for her. Continuing this slide. So, who is Shechem? We kind of got introduced to him last week. He is the son of the local ruler Hamor there in Shechem. It's confusing. He's named after the town they live in, okay? Be like I'm named Plain City, okay? Or Dublin. If you remember back to last week, at the end of last week's lesson, it was Hamor who previously sold Jacob the first property that he owns within the promised land outside the city. Okay, again, likely the inspiration for his son's name. Now, upon seeing Dinah in town, where Shechem is, in Shechem, he decides, hey, she looks great, I'm going to just take her, all right? He assaults her and rapes her. And the Hebrew language is very clear about that. It says he seized her. The word is lacha, and humiliated her. Ana. From that language, it is clear that this is done by force. There is no, approval there or whatever. No consent. There we go. Later, Jacob's sons will compare the abuse of their sisters as if she were a prostitute at the very last verse in this chapter. Right? And that just tells you how the men of this wicked populace treated their women. They treated her just like a typical Canaanite prostitute. Okay? And that's where we'll end up heading with this, like how common this kind of assault and rape was. Now, if you keep in mind, again, the context of what's going on here, of their cultures and what God called them to be, this evil act that was committed against Dinah would have caused her, who is no longer a virgin, to be limited in prospects for marriage, okay? That's what it means by humiliated her. By doing that, he took away from Dinah all marriage prospects, so to speak, okay? She's like, she has no choice now in the matter. Not that she probably had much of a choice to begin with, but now her marriage prospects are completely stripped away. And this is where it gets kind of weird. After Shechem does this heinous act, it says his soul was drawn to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob. Immediately afterward, he falls head over heels for her, in love with her, with the woman that he just physically assaulted and abused, okay? Humiliated. Now, clearly, this Shechem guy is crazy, okay? He's wickedly impulsive. He's a young man lacking all self-control, which we know from Galatians 5, along with sexual immorality and adultery and that kind of thing, is a work of the flesh, all right? This guy is a very wicked person, and he's impulsive. He's very dangerous. Impulsive people cannot be trusted, right? He lacks all self-control. And this is my language here. He's an entitled brat to this prince. I just abused this girl. Father, give her to me. Get her for me. It's like that young girl in that Willy Wonka movie. That's what it reminds me of. Father, I want that golden egg. All right. Though God remains silent, notice that God hasn't chimed in yet and says, or strikes down Shechem, how dare you assault one of my people, zap. Again, if I were God, that's what I would have done. Thank God I'm not him, okay? God is remaining silent. Now, I know there are people, unbelievers, who take that as consent. Silence is consent. God should have said something. But we got to just keep in mind, the purpose here of what's being written is to simply state the truth of the matter of what happened, okay? God's silence here is not condoning rape. In fact, it's the sum of God's word that is truth. You have to take in the whole counsel of God. And we know from God's law in Deuteronomy 22, it is clear, God is clear that sex offenders should be punished and victims cared for. Okay? So letting sex offenders out of prison scot-free is not righteousness. Anyone who would, the progressive left, who would like to assault God's character, silence is condoning it. No, letting them go free is, okay? Which is actually where we're heading in this narrative, not enacting justice. So Jacob heard that him being Shechem, had defiled his daughter Dinah, but his sons were with his livestock in the field. So Jacob held his peace until they came. And Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out to Jacob to speak with him. The sons of Jacob had come in from the field as soon as they heard of it, and the men were indignant and very angry because Shechem had done such an outrageous thing in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter. For such a thing must not be done. So Jacob hears what happens to Dinah, his daughter, who is born of Leah, and that matters. We'll get to that. She has been forcibly defiled. But yet he remains quiet, it says. He held his peace. And he doesn't even notify his sons who are out working his fields for him. All right? He doesn't send word to them and say, hey, come, let's talk about this. We need a war game, this, nothing. Right? Instead, what do his sons have to do? They hear about it out in the field, and they have to come approach their father about it. Now, as of yet, we're not given a reason why Jacob holds his peace. All right? But as we continue reading on through this chapter, specifically in verse 30, we'll find out that it's pretty much a sure thing that Jacob's aim is to avoid conflict with the surrounding pagan populace. even at the expense of any form of justice at all on Dinah's part. So what we'll find out is, though Jacob is wealthy and he has some servants and sons, he's timid about all the local populace ganging up on him, okay, and wiping him out. So he knows he's been wronged. He knows his daughter's been wronged, but he feels like there's nothing he can really do about it without upsetting everyone around him, and thus bringing more catastrophe on his family. Now, if that sounds like fear of man, that is absolutely a fear of man. And what did it do? It left him idle. This failure on Jacob's part will result in his sons filling the vacuum that Jacob left with their self-motivated scheming and unrighteous acts. Does that not sound like Jacob's family? Self-motivated scheming. The unrighteous wrath part's pretty new, though. Continuing these verses. So, as Jacob's sons are in the field, they find out about it. They return to their father's house to confront him to see what they're going to do about it. Just so happens, Hamor and his spoiled brat son, Shechem, arrive at Jacob's residence to come to some kind of an arrangement. Why? Because that's exactly what Shechem wants. Remember, after he defiles Dinah, he goes to his father and says, "Father, get her for me. I want her." And so what does his father do? "Okay, son, you're the best. Let's go." And he, condones that kind of behavior, so we can assume, and takes him over to Jacob's house. Okay, and I'm surprised they lived to talk about it already, right? Now, we are not told, keep this in mind, we are not told that Dinah has returned home yet. In fact, we know from verse 26 that she is likely still at Shechem's house, because that's where we next encounter her. She's at Shechem's house. So after he rapes and defiles her and falls head over heels with her, he keeps her there, okay? But Jacob's sons are super furious, understandably, that a local Canaanite, I don't care if he's a prince or they don't care he's a prince, has raped one of their own, has raped someone in Israel, an Israelite. And it's actually kind of impressive that they don't kill him right there on the spot when he walks into their house, okay? For now. Spoiler alert. I mean, they just raped her sister, or their sister. Now, we got to keep in mind, again, the context of what's going on here. It's important, it's noted that they say something like this in Israel should not be done, okay? Who are the Israelites? Again, they are a family that has been set aside by God. Why? To produce a chosen race of people, of descendants, which are undefiled from the world and its ways. And the world just defiled one of their own, okay? This flippant defilement of one of their women, which was a common religious expression of the Canaanite culture, that was a specific affront to the Israelites in their way. So their culture was God's way of doing things, not raping people, and yet their pagan religious culture says, no, we can do what we want, we can treat our women as we want. And so they treated one of their women the way, an Israelite woman the way. That is not only offensive, like with family speaking, that's offensive on a spiritual level, right? You corrupted our way of doing things because it's God's way of doing things. Now, this is the first time that the word Israel is actually used in reference to someone besides Jacob. Now, at the end of chapter 33, Jacob calls the land he's in God, the God of Israel, but this is the first time we're seeing it, the land and the people being called Israel after Jacob's new name, okay? So Israel has become a term for this covenant community called by God, and Jacob's entire household and the land they now possess because they bought it from Hamor and Shechem is now considered Israel as well, okay? It's who they are, their land and who they are in their way that is reflective of God's way. So this verse here in Genesis 34, verse 7, is the literal genesis of the Israelites here, in contrast to the other local populaces like the Hivites, the Hittites, the Amorites, Canaanites, that kind of thing. We have the Israelites. Are we good so far? Pretty straightforward. So Hamor and his son Shechem are at this house with Jacob and his very upset sons, and Hamor spoke with them saying, quote, "The soul of my son Shechem longs for your daughter. Please give her to him to be his wife. Make marriages with us. Give your daughters, notice it's plural, Jacob has more than one daughter. Give your daughters to us and take our daughters for yourselves. You shall dwell with us, and the land shall be open to you. Dwell and trade in it, and get property in it. Shechem also said to her father and to her brothers, let me find favor in your eyes, and whatever you say to me, I will give. Ask me for as great a bride price and gift as you will, and I will give you whatever you say to me. Only give me the young woman to be my wife. Pep down, Sonny, all right? Let the adults speak. So, I was going to make a joke, but it was pretty dark, so I'm not going to, okay? Just keep in mind, these Canaanites, they aborted a lot of children, right?
Keep going.
Okay. Why not this one? So, Hamor, the ruler of the land, mind you, doesn't come to Jacob and his sons making demands, but gently requests. He says, please give her to him, my son. He gently requests, politely requests, this ruler of the land, this king, that they give Dinah to his son Shechem. He's making it clear that Shechem longs. His soul is drawn to her. But notice in all this, so far, this proposal, there's nothing said of what Shechem did to her. Nothing of the assault. And there are a few reasons why, maybe a mix of reasons why Hamor completely doesn't bring up the whole assault rape thing. Okay? Remember, that was the normal way of doing things in their heinous culture. All right? Like, they just treated women like prostitutes. Also, they may assume Jacob and his sons aren't aware of it yet, so why bring it up? Maybe they don't know what Shechem did to Dinah, so let's just be gentle and delicate with this whole situation. But that's probably not likely the case, and I'll explain why here in a second. Hamor himself may not have known what Shechem did. It doesn't say Shechem told him, hey, I just raped this woman, now I want her as a wife. Hamor may not know. But again, I doubt that's the case. In fact, I believe the entire town knows about it, right, by what's said later. It's not that big of a town. Word gets around, okay? However, this is most likely the case, why they don't bring up the whole raping thing. This is not, Hamor's way of doing things here is not a tactic of friendliness, but damage control, okay? Hamor is being careful to keep things civil in case Jacob and his sons are aware of the rape, okay? Again, the Israelites are a legitimate threat to them. That's why he's being so kind. And that's what they will prove what kind of a threat they are to the local people. Okay? So Hamor immediately makes it clear that his son loves Dinah. Even if they heard that, Shechem raped Dinah, my son loves Dinah. He cares for her. Okay? As not to appear to just be completely dismissive of the rape. But moreover, Hamor wishes all their kin to intermarry. Now, that's a big problem there, knowing what we know about the Israelites and their calling. But Hamor's offering kind of an olive branch here in case Jacob and his sons are aware of what happened. Continuing these verses, he then adds a little bonus here. He adds shared economic interests to his proposal. Specifically, by joining their two houses, the Israelites will get even more property. Remember, they just bought property from Hamor, but they'll get even more if they assimilate to the local culture, and they'll become part of the local populace. How will they do that? Through intermarriage, which will open up to them yet another perk, business opportunities. Okay, you'll get if you give us your daughters and we intermarry. Well, he hasn't even gotten that far yet. If you give Shechem Dinah, you'll be welcome to get more land. You'll be prosperous. You'll be able to deal in business trade with us. But keep in mind, again, the context and what we know about Jacob and his family after they left Haran. They are already a very blessed household, aren't they? They came with camels and donkeys and a bunch of sheep. They gave a lot of it to Esau, right? But that was just leftovers, okay? They're rich. God has made them rich. And this is not the first time that local rulers in the land of Canaan had sought relationships with the descendants of Abraham. Abraham and his descendants, right? That's happened several times before, specifically thinking of Abimelech. Yeah, the Abimelechs, plural. Despite whatever moral failure or failures of Hamor in this situation that he may be guilty of, like maybe he's indifferent because he found out about Shechem raping Dinah and he doesn't care. Maybe he's trying to bribe Jacob and his sons into not pursuing vengeance or justice through what happened. We don't know exactly what moral failures this father is guilty of other than raising a terrible son, right? But he is at best saying positive about this. He is seeking a peaceful resolution through an alliance, all right? And that is more than what we can say of Jacob's sons, if you know this story, okay? At least he's come here, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term, in good faith. That didn't even sound right coming out of my mouth, but because what I just tell you, they're likely being very gentle about this as to kind of, gloss over the whole raping thing. However, Hamor is seeking more than what the Abimelech sought with Abraham and Isaac. What is he seeking? He's seeking the Israelites' total assimilation, not just an alliance. We're talking intermarriage here, right? And why is that a problem? Because we know what God has already told Abraham and what his purposes are for him. They are a nation of their own as a light to the world, right? The forerunner of the church, so to speak. And that runs contrary, that intermarriage runs contrary to the promises that God made to Abraham to keep him a separate nation and culture, okay? Keep in mind that Jacob shouldn't have even gone up here to Shechem, right? He was supposed to go to Bethel, really. And that's what the Lord's about to tell him after all this goes down. Go to Bethel, okay? And by going up to Shechem, remember he lied to Esau and went north instead of south, and that lie took him to Shechem eventually where all this happened. This could have all been avoided, right? Just like going up to Haran could have been avoided if he didn't scheme his way into the birthright, right? Man, we tend to shoot ourselves in the foot all the time, don't we? All right. Preach, Kevin. Then Shechem, this guy, then lacking all self-control, as we already established, Shechem is gross, jumps into his father's, call it what you want, but at least Hamor's being civil about, he's being, deliberate in his negotiation. And then here comes his loudmouth son, give me Dinah as my wife. Calm down, all right? With his exaggerant or extravagant desperation, Shechem joins in and says he'll literally give anything to have Dinah as his wife. He says in verse 12, ask me for a great bride price, that's a dowry, and gift as you will, and I will give you whatever you say to me. You want 12 Mercedes Benzes? Here they are. Here's the keys, okay? Just name your dowry you desire, and I will give it. Now, this reminded me a lot of Jacob when he went to Haran, and he liked Rachel, right? What'd he say? I'll work 7 years for free for your daughter, Rachel. And all negotiations from then on were in Lavan's favor, weren't they? This guy's desperate. I want to take advantage of this. He'll work 14 years, sucker. All right? That's exactly who I thought of. All right? And that's exactly what Jacob's sons are about to do. Capitalize on his desperation.
I thought of Samson.
Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He says, get me that woman.
Yeah. Yeah. See what greed and envy gets you? Right? You just want, take. Spoiled brats, that's right. Anyway, I didn't think of Samson. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. Maybe if he had a high and tight, none of that would have happened, all right?
But Hamor has a alternative motive all along.
Oh yeah, materialism, right? Yeah, that's exactly where we're going with this. So did we do this one? Yeah, so Genesis 34, verses 13 through 17, the sons of Jacob, it's their turn to speak now, answered Shechem and his father Hamor deceitfully because he had defiled their sister Dinah. That's their excuse. What's that?
Everybody know that.
Small town. Word gets around. And there might have been screaming involved, like, help me, all right?
Oh, I don't think so.
All right, we're just speculating. They said to them, we cannot do this thing to give our sister to one who is uncircumcised, for that would be a disgrace to us. Only on this condition we will agree with you, that you will become as we are by every male among you being circumcised. Verse 16, then we will give our daughters to you, and we will take your daughters to ourselves, and we will dwell with you and become one people. Kumbaya. But if you will not listen to us and be circumcised, then we will take our daughter and we will be gone. All right. Man, it's kind of ingenious what they're doing here. Let's get into it. So, Jacob's turn to respond, but does Jacob respond? He's still holding to his peace, apparently. All right. And so what happens? There's a void there. His sons fill it with what their way of doing things, okay? And their position, we're told, is not founded on good faith. It is deceit. That's what they're using, deceit. Yep. The legitimate covenant excuse. This is what's so ingenious. The sons of Jacob are using for rejecting Shechem and Hamor's offer, their initial plea to intermarry, is that the Hivites, Hamor's people, are not circumcised, and that's what God instructed them to do way back in the days of Abraham. Abraham, you need to get circumcised. Your son Isaac needs to get circumcised. Ishmael, everybody in your household, even if they're new, they all get circumcised. Okay? Everyone gets circumcised. So that's why this plan is not going to work out, they're saying. Okay? And at the same time as they're saying this, they make it known, albeit under their breath, that the raping of one of their own women by an uncircumcised pagan prince even, was disgraceful. All right? What's he say here exactly? We cannot do this thing to give our sister to one who is uncircumcised. Shechem. For that would be a disgrace to us. Oh, we know what happened here. But we can't let you sleep with our sister because that would be disgraceful. Oops. Already happened. Yeah. To be a fly on that wall. Ooh, it just got chilly in here.
So if he was circumcised, it would have been all right. Is that
Yeah, exactly. If you were circumcised, then we could forgive. All right? Yeah, interesting point. So, but Jacob's sons follow up with the bad news, okay? Or I'm sorry, they follow up the good news with the bad news. Good news that the men are led to believe is good news, right? If you're not circumcised, but it's a quick operation. You get it done, you got yourselves a deal, all right? Only then you get circumcised and all your people get circumcised, then we can become one people. So we can't have that happen, but there is something you can do to allow it to happen. If not, if you refuse, they put in a little subtle threat here. We will take our daughter and we will be gone. In the original language, that is a threat. They will take Dinah back by force because she's still at Shechem's place, okay? We'll get our daughter back, our sister back. So we know the sons are fully aware of that assimilation is not God's will for their people. They brought up circumcision. And they don't mean any of this anyway, all right? As we'll find out. This is all a ruse just to incapacitate the men of their newfound enemy, all right? They have set a trap. They have put the Hivites, Shechem and Hamor, in a corner here, though they don't know it. It's like they pet the sheep on the back of the head before putting that bolt between its eyes, okay? These people either submit and thrive, or, and they're going to die anyway, or refuse and be held accountable for what Shechem has done, okay? So there's really only one choice these people can make. Yeah, we're going to incapacitate ourselves and we're going to trust that you're not going to murder us in our sleep. But that's what's going to happen, okay? John.
Just a comment.
Yeah.
This might sound like coming from a heretic, but I think a deeper presentation here that transcends history. In a sense, we're talking about circumcision of the physical body, but I think it carries over. There needs to be a circumcision of the heart, circumcision of the brain. The brain really needs to have a change, and then also the soul needs, in a sense, needs to be circumcised and changed because it's what happened in the garden.
I wouldn't call you a heretic at all. At least not yet. No, when we, you're right on the money there, John. I would expect nothing less. When we covered this, when circumcision was first introduced to Abraham by God, that's exactly. Do you think God really cares about physical circumcision? Do you think that's like, I will not accept you unless the male sex organ looks exactly like this, there's a deeper purpose to it. Circumcision of the heart is pointing forward because God's a little bit smarter than the rest of us, isn't he? Shocker, right? Yeah, exactly, John. Thank you for bringing that up. That's very important. And we're going to touch on that briefly here in a little bit. What the irony of what's going on here. I kind of like it, right? Oh, it's right here. How about that? I'm so happy. The irony. Jacob's sons, think about this. Jacob's sons require these pagans get circumcised. A symbolic gesture of creating a people set apart for God. It is a changing of the mind, changing of the heart, it's submitting to God, the circumcision, cutting out your own ways. While they themselves, Jacob's sons themselves, are behaving as the world behaves. How? Deceit. That's of the world, man. So they're using spiritual words and God's way of doing things specifically to become unlike the world, but they're using it in a way to be like the world. Totally backwards. They're behaving as the world behaves, ungodly in using spiritual words to cover for their scheming. Using God's ways in vain. That's what they're doing. And so though we can sympathize with their righteous anger, their anger is righteous because an objectively moral wrong was done to their sister. However, the preferable ends do not justify the unrighteous means. The preferable ends, this is how we want our outcome to be, do not justify we're going to do whatever it takes to reach those ends, even if it's unrighteous acts that they're about to do. So they pervert the holy sign of circumcision by mixing it with the sin of deception to enable their opportunity for unbalanced justice. All right? Deception that is without a doubt an inheritance once again passed down from the family line. We've seen this time and time again in Abraham's family. Abraham deceived about his hot sister Sarai. Isaac did the same thing, actually. And then Rebekah, Isaac's wife, deceived Isaac with Jacob. Jacob deceived, and then Jacob gets deceived by him. Man, this family is messed up, okay? And think about this. What was the last deception that Jacob did last week? Oh, Esau, yeah, we'll follow you south. Come on, kids, we're going north. And he did that right in front of his children. Where do you think they learned it from? Second Polly. Tina, that's you, Romans 12, 17 through 18.
Repay no evil for evil, but give thought to what is honorable in the sight of all. If possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all.
Yeah. Pay no evil for evil. Okay? Pay no one evil for evil. In Romans 12, 18, Tina, you said that's what Polly has you guys memorizing in. I wish she was here. I'm sure she knows about it, though. I should have made you recite that by memory. That's what you get for volunteering. All right.
She knew it, right?
Yeah. All right, so verses 18 through 23. Their words pleased Hamor and Hamar's son Shechem, suckers. And the young man did not delay to do the thing, because he delighted in Jacob's daughter. Now he was the most honored of all his father's house. Wow. All right. Trish, I love you. So Hamor and his son Shechem came to the gate of their city and spoke to the men of their city, saying, "These men are at peace with us. Let them dwell in the land and trade in it. For behold, the land is large enough for them. Let us take their daughters as wives, and let us give them our daughters. Only on this condition will the men agree to dwell with us to become one people." And is this: when every male among us is circumcised as they are circumcised, will not their livestock and their property and all their beasts be ours? That's their motivation, isn't it? Only let us agree with them, and they will dwell with us. All right. So Hamor and Shechem are happy to hear the news from Jacob's sons, and they're happy to hear there's a way to come to this intermarriage coming together, right? This ecumenism. Albeit it's a painful way, okay? A painful way out of their predicament with the potential for vast riches. So in their excitement that they found a way, they get right on it. Yay, let's go! Oh, I would not be excited, okay? But first they need to convince the men of the city to get this painfully and even potentially infection, right? Potentially dangerous procedure done. The pain would concern me most, okay? I don't like pain. Now, recall that it was Jacob who previously came to arrangement with Laban to breed livestock. Remember that a few chapters back? Jacob wanted to leave and return to the land of Canaan, and Laban's like, oh, just name your wages. Let's come to a deal. So they come to a deal, and what does Laban do? He had no good faith in keeping that in his end of the deal, did he? And he changed it up. What do you think is happening here with Jacob's sons? They're doing the exact same thing. Was it right for Laban to do that? So how could we say it's right for Jacob's sons to do this as well? They made a deal. They better keep that deal. But they don't. Spoiler alert, all right? God does not change. His ways do not change, right? Again, the ends do not justify the means. Now it says, and this is, the irony just keeps coming. Now he was the most honored of all his father's house. I looked into that. Apparently he was a beloved leader in the city, Shechem. This is who the people looked up to. How depraved, and this goes back to this kind of culture that just rapes women at will and thinks it's religious. What kind of depraved culture must look at a rapist with such admiration? Man, Shechem is such a good guy. To people who are blind, yeah, sure. And you think that's not the way it is in our culture? Who gets all the reality shows? You think it's the godly people? No, they're not fun and entertaining. It's those people that just go against the cultural norms and send their way to fame, right? That's the old man in me just complaining about the culture, okay? It deserves complaining about, right? But we should also do something about it, and we are. We're the church, right? We are the light.
Get them all circumcised.
Get them all circumcised. Step up to the plate. Again, the pagan Canaan culture saw no real issue with what their prince had done. All right, and you got to keep in mind why is Hamar in his speech to the local populace being so, political about it? It's because everyone in town knows what Shechem did. They're probably fearful. That's why he's saying, "Listen, they'll be at peace with us." It's a small. When it says city of Shechem, it's probably like no more than 100 people. It's more like what we call a hamlet or village. So again, everyone knows. Hamor likely knows what Shechem did. So he's probably trying to ease their worries about, our prince just wronged the local Israelites. They're a pretty big household. And then here comes Hamor with the good news. If we do a painful process surgery thing, we're good. Whew, whew. All right. And there's bonus points that come with this. We get perks. All right, let's do it. All right. We can marry into their and get all their livestock. That's where he's going with this. Okay. The father and son, Hamor and Shechem, begin their pitch to the city's men by first reassuring them that Jacob's household has agreed to peace with them. Whew. All right. Even though Shechem just wronged them. Okay. And he follows it up that this peace means the Israelites should be allowed to assimilate into their culture and commerce. Again, business opportunities. And with all that comes the opportunity to join the two parties through new marriage prospects. Good news, guys, you go through a little bit of pain, but then there's a lot of fun. All right, you got new daughters to have fun with. But then informs them of one condition they must meet for this deal to go through. There is a caveat, there's a catch to intermarrying with the Israelites. We got to do something, okay? We got to get circumcised. And they know what this means because circumcision was already a thing. God just pulled it aside and used it as his own. As John was saying, to point forward to a deeper truth. However, Hamor follows it up with more attractive benefits. So he gives them the good news that peace can be made with Israel, gives them the bad news, it's going to require circumcision to intermarry, and then he's so smart, he follows it up with even more good news, all right? He sandwiches the bad news between newses of good. They will share in Jacob's material wealth. If we do this, will not their livestock, their property, and all their beasts be ours? And that right there informs us just how vastly wealthy Jacob's household has become under God's sovereign protection, right? Even this local ruler, Hamor, he's the ruler, right? He's wealthy, but they look at what the Israelites have, and they want that. That tells you how wealthy Jacob really has become. It also informs us what's really important to these Hivites, isn't it? These local pagans. It's materialism. They want the livestock, they want the property, all right? And the women, apparently, they'll take that by force. But this love for the world will be their downfall. It's the very thing that's going to get them into trouble. It already got them into trouble. It's going to get them into the grave. While Jacob's sons are using God's covenant mark of circumcision for their own selfish desires, they're using the excuse of circumcision to make their plot their murder, right? Yet the people are doing the same thing. The people of Shechem, they're doing the same thing. They're using circumcision their own way to get material gain. God's ways are just being corrupted by everybody here. And look how it's going to turn out. All right. And all who went out of the gate of the city listened to Hamor and his son Shechem, and every male was circumcised, all who went out of the gate of this city. On the third day, when they were sore, 2 of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, took their swords and came against the city while it felt secure and killed all the males. Overreaction? Maybe. I mean, maybe not. They killed Hamor and his son Shechem with the sword and took Dinah out of Shechem's house and went away. So the city gets the proposal from Hamor and Shechem. This is what we got to do. And they're like, yay, let's go. All right. And they all get circumcised, every male. All right. Not a huge deal for an infant to get circumcised. All right. They don't know what's going on. Okay. However, this is thousands of years before local anesthesia, right, was invented. They might have had opiates or whatever to smoke or chew, but they didn't have local anesthesia. Okay. So this surgery, in case you weren't aware, is pretty painful and debilitating. And this is why the sons of Jacob proposed it, okay? They know what's going to happen, okay? Well, if we're going to fight these guys, we can't, offer them, protein. That's not going to help, right? That'll just make them stronger. Let's have them get circumcised so they can't do anything, and they'll be rendered useless, right? Circumcision requires weeks to recover. And by the third day after getting circumcised, that's actually when, and they know this because they've had it done, that's when soreness peaks, all right? You don't want to get out of bed. You don't even want to go to the bathroom, I'm sure. Rendering the men of the city, and really, again, it's just the size of a small village, totally immobile at this time. Their guard is, not only can they not really move, their guard's down because they think this very act is going to bring peace. No watchmen on the wall, right? Man, that's why I'm saying this ploy was so ingenious, okay? And that's pretty impressive to think of that right on the spot because it's not like they slept on it. It was at this time that Simeon and Levi, and likely also their servants, though the text doesn't say that, sprung their tactfully effective trap and led an attack on the city. Okay? Man, they should make them the Secretary of War. This war would be over. First, they murdered these brothers, and these 2 brothers, and likely their servants, murder all the circumcised males of the town. But, however, per verse 29 we'll get to, probably not the young boys. It sounds like they just did those of fighting age, okay? Then they executed their ruler and prince with their swords. They grabbed their sister Dinah from Shechem's house and bring her home. Now, it's, again, talking about context of who Simeon and Levi are in their relationship to Dinah. Keep in mind that they were children of Leah, specifically alongside Dinah. Dinah was their direct sister. So it makes sense they're the ones not only leading the attack, they're doing the attack, while the other brothers are just going to sweep up the spoils, right? And who is Leah? She's the wife Jacob didn't favor, is she? So it doesn't make sense, but okay, I understand why maybe Jacob didn't really care for the justice. I don't really care about Leah anyway, all right? Jacob did nothing to get justice for Dinah. It's Leah's daughter. Meanwhile, Shechem, who wronged them, who was he? He was a spoiled brat of his beloved father. All right? You think this might have played, during the negotiations, Jacob's sons are like, man, this guy Shechem, he's loved by his father. Look what his father's doing for him. Our father hates us. He won't even give us justice. I hate this guy. Let's kill him. Maybe that's going into a little resentment. All right? I'm not a psychologist, but that makes sense to me, okay? This would explain their more personal anger over the raping of Dinah, their direct sister, than Jacob's other sons and their anger, although I'm sure they were angry, but not as angry as them, right? Now, I found it interesting that Levi was one of them. Who's Levi? That's the priest family, right? Practical application, God can redeem and repurpose even deeply flawed people for his purposes, all right? I also thought of Rambunctious Pete. Remember our study of John and the Thunder Brothers? Those guys needed to be around Jesus, didn't they? Maybe that's why I'm here. I need to be around Jesus. I think I proved that with my wayward ways in the past, all right? So, yeah, it's interesting. The Levi's tribe will be God's priests, and their founding father was a murderer. Okay. God can use me. I haven't murdered anyone yet. So, the sons of Jacob came upon the slain and plundered the city because they had defiled their sister. They took their flocks and their herds, their donkeys, and whatever was in the city and in the field. All their wealth, their little ones, there it is, their little ones and their wives, all that was in the houses. They captured and plundered. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, "You have brought trouble on me by making me stink to the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites and the Perizzites. My numbers are few, and if they gather themselves against me and attack me, I shall be destroyed, both I and my household." Sounds like Jacob's thinking about Jacob, isn't he? I, me, Marcia. But they said, "Should he treat our sister like a prostitute?" Healthy family stuff here. So after Simeon and Levi slaughtered the males, Jacob's 9 other sons arrived to get the spoils, get the booty, all right? And they plundered the massacred city because their sister had been defiled and humiliated, the text said. A complete reversal of the town's expectation given their recent deal. They were all about worldly gains and themselves, and they ended up in the grave. All right. Instead, it was Jacob's family that gets all the wealth from them. They wanted wealth from Jacob's family. Jacob's family gets the wealth from them. See where putting your eyes on the wrong thing gets you? Nothing was off limits. Not even the widows of the city, nor their children, including the boys, were spared the sword. And that was a common practice, as you know, if you read through the Old Testament, like Judges and stuff. This is just the thing to do. You killed all the fighting men, and then you took the rest, like Nebuchadnezzar did. They may have even now this is kind of rude. They may have even physically disabled oxen that they couldn't keep for themselves for whatever reason. That's what the blessing that Jacob's going to give his kids on his deathbed. When he gets to Simeon and Levi, he makes it sound like what they did was slice the heels of the oxen. They couldn't plow field. Those left behind couldn't plow field. Like, man, that's rude. That's going above and beyond retribution there. Poor animals, okay? God loves his animals, okay? But their father, Jacob, does not approve of their actions. But not because it was the immoral thing to do, right? Does he say anything like, "Oh, you shouldn't have done this. That was wrong. God does not approve"? No, he says, "No, I'm going to be destroyed now." Good job, Jake. His response informs us why he didn't act upon hearing the news himself of Dinah's rape. Because though he is vastly wealthy, he doesn't have the manpower or servants to match the combined power of all the local tribes. Yeah. That's his survival was still he's become Israel, but he's still got plenty of Jake left in him, doesn't he? That's sanctification for you, okay? He still has this fear of man. Despite God's promises of protection and Jacob's limp to prove those promises, Jacob has a fear of his Canaanite and Perizzite neighbors. And of course, per God's promises that he has given over and over again through our study in Genesis, Jacob's house, the truth is it cannot be destroyed, and it will not be destroyed. Why are you fearing? Why did your fear leave you immobile, Jake? In fact, again, a reversal of expectations is going to happen. Jacob's not learning his lessons. He feared Esau, had no point in doing it. He fears his neighbors, no point. Why? Because we will learn in chapter 35 that the locals are going to fear his family because of this. I guess that makes sense. They just slaughtered an entire town. Don't mess with them. You know, they get angry easily. Jacob did have the bigger picture and long game in mind. Jacob was forward thinking in this regard. His desire to secure a future for all his descendants as God has promised. But once again, because he had fear, he failed to lead his family, and we saw this in Haran. That's why his wives were bickering and going after each other. Jacob wouldn't step up and lead. All this could have been avoided. This slaughter could have been avoided had Jacob obediently gone to Bethel instead of Shechem, as he vowed to do with God in chapter 38. So Jacob should be pointing his finger at himself. "Oh, you did this, my sons. This is wrong. No, I'm going to be destroyed." There you go, Jacob. Proverbs 29:25, Tina.
The fear of man lays a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is safe.
The fear of man lays a snare. What a snare this was. A lot of animals caught in that snare. Last slide. For their part, Jacob's sons were thinking small time, right? Not they rambunctious, like they were just short-sighted, weren't they? Jacob was thinking long-term welfare of his family and himself, but his sons were thinking all about just vengeance. Just give us vengeance. Vengeance and material gain, because they took all the booty for themselves, right? They became nearsighted and impulsive. That's what a ungodly desire gets you. Impulsive, just like Shechem, lack of self-control, nearsighted, raging anger, uncontrollable anger, failing to think critically and war game out all the geopolitical angles and possible consequences for dress. Do you think that what was going on in Jacob's mind of if we act wrongly here, we could upset our neighbors and they could all come against us? Do you think that was going on through his son's head? They were so uncontrollably furious about this. Instead of giving it to God, they just acted impulsively. They didn't think, if we slaughter everyone, there might be some sort of political ramifications for that. But expecting their father Jacob to do nothing about the injustice, which he wasn't doing anything, they irrationally punished the entire town. It was just one guy who committed this thing. And sure, maybe the town kind of covered for him. Certainly his father probably did. Whoa, was that a harsh punishment, all right, for one man's actions. Their response to the injustice done to their house and God's calling for them to be a separate nation does not make them or their imbalanced sense of justice and genocide righteous, does it? Though it may certainly appear to be, right? Even today, we live in a culture where, it's understandable. Some guy or whatever, is convicted of pedophilia. Put him to death. They tend to be reoffenders anyway. And it's like, well, okay, we also have to think of God's way of doing justice. Maybe the death penalty is a thing, but you got to give your emotions to the Lord. Is this you again, Tina?
Yes, it is.
Proverbs 19:2.
Desire without knowledge is not good, and whoever makes haste with his feet misses his way.
Desire without, that's important, without knowledge. Desire without knowledge is not good. And whoever makes haste with his feet misses his way. So I think it was the second of the two questions I put in my email is it righteous to seek justice? God's word says, righteousness seeks justice. They were seeking justice for what happened to their sister. But even though you're seeking justice, does your actions then, your follow-up actions then make it necessarily righteous? Is what they did righteous though? They were getting justice, but was this righteous? No. God is
It really should have been Jacob's place.
exactly. But he didn't do anything,
But
did
we
he?
know these boys. They want to kill their younger brother. They have no upbringing.
No leadership.
Right.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
But the mama's to blame too, sorry.
No, it's a team effort, right? Parenting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're wild.
Like a wild donkey.
Slap.
Slap. Spanking's biblical. All right. So they're seeking justice, but is what they did righteous? It's very nuanced, and that's exactly where we're going next week with our topical study on biblical righteousness. What may appear as righteous, actually, I would say rarely so is actually the case, especially in our culture today. Righteousness, biblical righteousness, is a chameleon. It can only be discerned through one avenue. And that definition for biblical righteousness in this study just keeps getting narrower and narrower and narrower. What you think is righteous probably often isn't, okay? But that will come next week. I'm still working on it. I'm at the end of it. I don't know how many weeks it's going to be, 2, maybe 3. But it's going to be challenging, so prepare ye. God may have used this event. Think about this. God could have used Jacob's sons for good in his own way, which I'm sure he does, because that's what God does, right? Maybe he used this as an opportunity to punish the people of Shechem, because they are a wicked nation, right? They just rape whoever they want and call it religion. But chapter 49, again, the deathbed confession or deathbed blessing will tell us of what will come of Simeon and Levi's tribes because of their unrighteousness here, right? And this unrighteousness is rooted in their lack of faithfulness. That is a hint for next week. All unrighteousness is rooted in unfaithfulness. You trust God to have vengeance on your behalf, and that day will come eventually. You work in your own strength, out of your own anger and sense of justice and vengeance. You tip the scales heavily. Look what happens. The blessing that was meant for you, but we'll get there in chapter 49. Anybody have any? Ooh, wow, look at that. That's like perfect. Yeah.
So what this says to me is that at this point in time, the world was in chaos. And God said, I need to put some moral clarity around this. And so that in Exodus and Deuteronomy, he lays out some parameters upon which we now can base what we're doing and what we're thinking and what our actions are.
I think that's what I keep thinking of when I'm going through this study is everything that's happening in Genesis, it feels like was laid out purposefully to point the way to the law that God's going to give. Like, you want to know why thou shalt not, murder and stuff? Remember back what happened here in Genesis, that keeps coming to me. Yeah, that's interesting. Anyone else?
Yeah, because this chapter didn't mention God,
Yeah.
especially Jacob's sons,
Yeah.
and that creates mayhem.
That's right.
Then and today, right?
Yeah. You take God out of it, what are you left with?
Yeah.
Disorder and
Mayhem.
chaos.
Right.
People doing what's right in their own eyes.
Yeah.
Like the end of Judges.
And that's something that's going to come up in our topical study we're going to do. Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else?
Good job.
All glory to him. I'm just a tool.
Amen.
Where is Shechem now?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I had a map last week, so let me just visualize it for you. You have Jerusalem down here, okay? You have the Jordan River, right, that goes up to Dead Sea down here, Lake of Galilee up here, Sea of Galilee. And then right to the west of the Jordan River, between the Dead Sea and the Sea of Galilee, is Shechem over here, okay? It's
It's north of Jerusalem, right?
It's north. It's way north of Jerusalem.
Because that's
Way
where
north.
we went instead of south.
Yeah, and in Edom, where he said he'd go with Esau's way down below the Dead Sea. Yeah, so they went northwest from where they met with Esau into the Promised Land. Does that clarify? Good question. All right. Heavenly Father, thank you for this time together, my God. Thank you for your word. Your word is the way of sanctification, my God. Jesus, your Son, prayed, sanctify them in the truth. Your word is truth. So continue to cleanse us of our uncircumcised hearts and give us a heart of flesh, my God, that seeks your way of doing things and not our own, because your way is the righteous way, and apart from you we have no righteousness. And apart from your righteousness, my God, we go off into chaos and darkness. So as your children, we trust in you to guide us in your light, even if we don't know what's going on specifically in our own lives. We give it to you, and we trust that you will lead the way for us. For your glory, in Jesus' name, amen.